Yeah, lovely to see you. Wayne, before we start, if you would acknowledge country for us.
Okay.
And the choir will sing after you do this.
Okay, so okay, just wait a little bit late. But I think everyone can hear me, can you?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to set a couple of things straight is that there's been a lot of controversy about welcome to country and sorry.
So we can see you in.
Oh right, so live streaming. So what? Come back this side.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
That's right. Yeah.
How's that? Right. Okay, so just so that we got a few things straight, and there's a lot of misconceptions about welcome to country and acknowledgements to country and things like and so just to set it right is that the way that it works in McGinjan is that when the colony, the first part of the invasion took place, there was a treaty set up between a lot of the nations in southeast Queensland and out into Western Queensland, out up to my country. I come from a place called Colomulla. It's about 10 hours west from here, but our group sent warriors down here as a part of the McGinjan, the Brisbane Blacks Treaty, to defend against the colony. And that was under a war chief called Dundalli. So that and this happened in many of the main points, whether it was Sydney or whether it was Perth, where nations had chosen to go to war to defend their country, to defend their families and to defend their children and to defend their land. So that in itself was a treaty between those nations that went to war. Those treaties that had never been rescinded, and those treaties allow people like myself and other people that are a part of that original treaty. So those treaties have never been rescinded. I've been afforded the responsibility to when this is not a welcome to country, and by no means, but this is an acknowledgement. This is something that you can do. It's a part that anybody can do when you go into someone else's country. It's a part of our law. The law that holds everyone together in our country, that allows 400 groups to occupy this continent, is the Woomera law. We're the only other people in the world that don't have the bow and arrow. But each one of our nations carry the Woomera. And that Woomera symbolises the occupation that 400 nations have on this continent. It enables the trade, it enables the marriage systems that go with it, enables all those other treaties that coexistence needs to survive and to coexist on the one continent. So when you imagine 400 different nations, it's, we got, what have we got, 166 nations in the UN, and they can't get on, was where we had a continent of 400 nations where we were able to coexist quite for a long time. So it's through that law and that law of responsibility. But this is something, there's a difference between the welcome to country. I'm not saying it's not out, it's out of place or anything, but there is a time and place for the welcome to country. But when we meet in groups like this and you're on someone else's country that acknowledges the country, we usually just light a fire, but we haven't got the space to light a fire, but it's just really explaining and making sure that those people know that we're here, and that's what it is. Because if you don't allow people to know that you're there, they suspect that you're sneaking around and you're up to no good. And
Thanks, Wayne. That's great.
That's the way that we do it. So I hope you have a good weekend over to the choir and share some information.
Thanks so much, Wayne.
So you want we're standing here? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Wayne. We're standing here or sitting here. Well, this is an emergency. This is an Extinction Rebellion song written by Ali Dave and arranged by H. Yeomans. It's never been more important to sing for our lives. That's why we're standing here.
Standing here, oh, this is an emergency. We're standing here for all that we hold dear. We're standing here for beauty and diversity. And we're standing in the love that binds us all. And we demand our governments must tell the truth, and they must have, as if the truth is real. And we demand our citizens' assembly to urgently create a Green New Deal. We're rising up, we stand here in rebellion, and we declare that because sun is the crown, in love and grace, and peaceful disobedience, the signs are clear. We're running out of time. We're standing here, for this is an emergency. We're standing here for all that we hold dear. We're standing here for beauty and diversity. And we're standing in the love that binds us all. And we demand our governments must tell the truth, and they must act as if the truth is real. And we demand our citizens' assembly to urgently create a Green New Deal. We're rising now, we stand here in rebellion, and we declare that because signs are crowned in love and grace, and peaceful disobedience, the signs are clear. We're running out of time. We're standing here, for this is an emergency. We're standing here for all that we hold dear. We're standing here for beauty and diversity, and we're standing in the love that binds us all.
Thanks for inviting us. This is our final song. It's If I Were Free. Look, it's an old song. It's by well, most people know it as Peter, Paul and Mary. We think we own it. Been singing it for years and reviving. So, anyway, we can almost hear old friends singing along with us. It's that old. We've been going for 38 years. And I think 37 years ago, I remember hearing this song. If I were free.
You can't come around a bit. I just feel like I've lost my hand of pain. So I've sort of lost that end of angle. It's just there.
Shows your best side, Bruce.
You got the note?
If I were free to speak my mind, until I tell to humankind of how the flowers bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we fade. This weary world has had its fill of words of war on every hill. The time has come for peace, they say, for peaceful folk with peaceful way. If I were free to speak my mind, I'd tell to humankind of how the flowers bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we fade. When humankind has ceased to fight, I'll raise my hand in thanks each night for this region I'm holding. Oh, golden days and peaceful dreams. If I were free to speak my mind, I'd tell a tale to humankind of how the flowers bloom and fade, of how we fall and how we pay.
Of how we fought and how we paid. Nothing could be more relevant at this moment in history as we watch the genocide in Palestine. So we're here today to talk about peace. We've got a strong focus on peace in the Pacific as the drums of war are beating in this region and as the war is unfolding in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. So we really are at a point where we need to have the strength of the many to work against this war machine that is totally against the interests of humanity and only in the interests of the few who profit and profiteer from both the arms industry, but also hegemony, maintaining power around the world. And I think I know we will all know which particular countries we're referring to. The United States and its major and diminishing list of allies, but its major ally in the Middle East, Israel, committing war crimes as we speak. We all know about it. We've seen the pictures on our televisions. We've been at the rallies, and we are here in solidarity with those people for their liberation from this horrible crime that's going on. So the organisers of this conference include the Pacific Peace Network, IPAN, the Independent and Peaceful Australia Network, Just Peace, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, IPAN, I meant to say. And we're very grateful to the Queensland Nurses and Midwives Union to host today in such a beautiful venue next to the Brisbane River. And we thank the Combined Unions Choir and Uncle Wayne for opening the conference with songs of peace, determination and recognition of the First Nations of this land that we're meeting on. I'd just like to welcome up the QNMU Secretary, Sarah Bowman, and Sarah's just going to go through a few things, and welcome from QNMU herself. Thanks.
I'm a lot shorter in person than on television, so can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. So I'm Sarah Beeman. I'm the secretary of the QNMU. I'm a nurse. I'm a second generation nurse. I am very proud to be able to offer our facilities here today. We are very blessed to be in Kurilpa here in Meanjin. And they want to join the party. We're very blessed to be in this space. We know that this is
Go ahead, Sarah.
You sure?
Yeah.
It gives me great honour to be able to say that the QNMU is a member of IPAN, and we're very happy to have our facilities made available to you today. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping. The fire, as much as you probably think that the way to exit in the event of a fire is through these doors, it sort of is, but obviously you're going to exit wherever the fire is not, but the fire assembly point is over in the back corner of the car park if you need it. The toilets are outside. I think Janet is probably most familiar with the building here today. So Janet, if you want to, we take safety very seriously. So we don't expect anyone to burn the place down, so you shouldn't need to run. But I'm very proud to be able to offer our facilities. Please enjoy your day. And for those online, I hope the audio stays well for you. We are going to be redoing this room. And thank you to Annette. It's great to bring this many people that care together about the things that matter. So welcome to our building. Enjoy your day and have a great one.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sarah. Yeah. So today you will hear from a range of people, experts speaking on what's confronting peace in the world, including the ongoing existential threats of climate change and nuclear weapons. You will hear about Australia's steady move forwards as a military base for the United States and the United Kingdom, to two Anglo-colonial powers asserting their exceptionalist beliefs as they prepare to wage yet another major war in the Pacific and East Asia. We hope the dialogue today will empower us all to work harder, to build connections across the Pacific, enabling a powerful movement to change away from militarism towards a loud, cooperative voice for peace building in the world. Our first speaker today, and we're very appreciative of Alison Broinowski, Dr. Alison Broinowski. She is a former diplomat, Australian diplomat, author, and a long-time supporter of IPAN. She's also on the board. I'm just not up to date whether your position on Australians for War Powers reform. Are you still the director of Australians for War Powers Reform. That's wonderful. And Alison is also the Australian sector leader for World Beyond War, the US-led World Beyond War. And she often writes for Pearls and Irritations, Arena, and other like-minded publications. So welcome, Alison. Come and enlighten us.
Sorry, just some tech maintenance issues.
The techies here.
The first time I've ever heard myself described that way.
Thank you, Annette and colleagues. And I also extend our respects to the Indigenous custodians of this land, who, if they can keep their sovereignty, are doing better than the rest of us. That is all I have to say on that subject for the moment. Australians go to meetings like this so often now and so often say, whoop, pardon me. Sorry, I just put it up a bit. That's better. And so often say, what can we do? Today, I want to suggest a list of things that we can do, opportunities that Australia has to achieve independence and peace in our region. And actually, I've written a list of 11, but I'm not going to go through them all because I've only got 10 minutes. And if you want the whole lot, the paper will be available, I'm sure. And of course, one of the ways that we have abandoned the sovereignty I mentioned is what's going on right here and now, Talisman Sabre. What better way to surrender your sovereignty to another country than to engage with its military in preparation for war against your neighbours? I can't think of a worse way of doing it. And yet Australia has the capacity to prevent the war, to prevent a war against China. If we choose to do that, that is opportunity number one. China, of course, has risen technologically, economically, and politically, while the United States is falling behind in everything except military power. And its empire around the world's 187. China has 6. I recommend to you World Beyond War's amazing global map of military bases everywhere, which when I saw it was the reason I joined World Beyond War. It's amazing and it keeps being updated and corrected. And those bases in Australia have been multiplying too, ever since Julia Gillard, as Prime Minister, agreed with President Obama in 2011 on the US pivot to Asia. Her theory, and that of Kim Beazley, was that if the US wouldn't defend Australia, it would defend a US base. So the more of those, the better, they thought. Getting rid of them is opportunity number 2. With the Force Posture Agreement of 2014, Australia guaranteed the US military unimpeded access to our air and seaports, including for nuclear submarines and nuclear-capable B-52 bombers under US operational control, and for 25,000 US Marines in bases in the Northern Territory. The Defence Cooperation Agreement gives the US its own command centres in Darwin and embedded staff inside defence in Canberra. At Pine Gap, of course, as you know, US military accesses strategic satellite surveillance information, which it passes to others, including Israel and its military, for use against the Palestinians in Gaza. So we are more than complicit. We are players. And taking back control of all of that is opportunity number 3. It's all right. I've cancelled 4 more, which you can read later. Our Prime Minister says he won't be rushed on Palestine, but he was rushed into agreeing to AUKUS at 24 hours notice. And now he's trying to secure the US agreement, the AUKUS agreement, at huge cost and no reward, locking Australia into support of US aggression.
Excuse me.
Taiwan is expected to provide the excuse for that war. Okay.
Had a request for the people on.
Even though the US and Australia both recognize Taiwan as Australia's territory. What?
Computer.
Yeah, the people online, what we forgot to tell you. that-
People online would like you to be closer to the computer.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's a very good
All right.
request.
Hi, everyone. Oh, dear. It's not my day.
Oh,
It
don't
is,
me.
it is not my day.
That's just fine.
Okay.
Don't
Anyway.
worry about it.
Reclaiming our sovereignty is what our opportunity number 9, and joining the anti-war movement internationally. Australia's ASEAN and Pacific neighbours, who were not settler colonists, as we were, and who were bonded by their regional resistance to interference by colonizers and great powers, understand sovereignty different from our Defence Minister Richard Marles. For them, it means independence, non-alignment, and neutrality. Australia has missed a number of opportunities to join them. China, on the other hand, offers zero tariffs to the global south and endorses ASEAN's political independence and economic security. World Beyond War counts 39 countries that don't have military forces at all. Their people survive peacefully and economically, and in growing numbers, such nations are applying to join the BRICS, which focuses on economic development and non-alignment. And Australia could do the same. That's opportunity number 10. Recently, the ICJ ruled unanimously that states have an obligation to cut greenhouse gas emissions, and not doing so may violate international law and require reparations. Military operations themselves are huge emissions of carbon and greenhouse gases. So not only do wars of aggression violate international law, they may expose leaders, including Australia's, who wage such wars to accusations of international war crimes. Climate crimes, in fact. So comparing war and climate change and deciding which we should pursue is opportunity number 11. In conclusion, the logic of our survival as a sovereign state leads to the obvious conclusion: get rid of alliances, adopt neutrality and non-alignment, armed or unarmed. That means no foreign bases in Australia. Remembering what Malcolm Fraser wrote in 2014 about that, I quote the immortal words of IPAN's Bevan Ramsden. He wrote, "Clearly, neutrality is not an option until our continent is cleared of foreign military installations." This is the message to the Australian people. Only a massive, broad-based, united public effort can clear the ground for the adoption of a political solution that will keep us safe and out of foreign wars, namely non-nuclear armed neutrality. You don't hear or read much about that in our parliament or in our mainstream media, but that is the logical conclusion and opportunity. And finally, Nick Dean in Sydney, who, when people say, if you want peace, prepare for war, he replies, if you prepare for war, war is what you're likely to get. Australians who want peace are demanding in growing numbers that our leaders prepare for peace. And thanks to IPAN and all the organizations here, for their persistent efforts in doing that. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Alison. You really set the stage for the rest of this first session in particular. I'd like to welcome up now Remah Naji. Remah is known to all of us in Queensland, in Brisbane, as a spokeswoman for the Palestine Support and Action Network. Remah is a diaspora Palestinian woman from Jaffa. Alongside her paid job at the University of Queensland and her unpaid job as a mother, Remah is a lead organiser for Justice for Palestine Mianjin, and she is a unionist, yay, and content creator and translator, amongst other things. Welcome, Remah. Watch. Somehow rather this is not sitting in there very neatly. There we go. Is that high enough, Remah? Need to speak closely to the laptop and for the online.
The microphones are in the room and the laptop's microphone is for the people online.
All right, the people online, can you hear me clearly? All good? Everyone here can hear me clearly?
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Thank you all very much for being here. I feel incredibly honored to share this day with all of you. I'd like to also acknowledge that we are meeting on the soil and land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I recognize that sovereignty was never ceded. And also when we talk about colonization isn't a point in history. Colonization is a practice, and it's an ongoing practice that gave us things like domestic violence, racism, supremacy. All of these things are core parts of its design and essential to upholding its power structures. And if I'm standing here, I owe it to the Aboriginal people of this land who allowed us to work and organize on your soil and land, to speak truthfully. And I also owe it to the Palestinian people to say the truth as it is. I'm not going to beautify it. I am not going to try and make it more palatable. I owe it to the people in Palestine and the people who gave me this confidence to stand here and share what I know is true for all of us and name it without hesitation. So I'm a Palestinian woman from Jaffa. Jaffa is now so-called Tel Aviv. My father was displaced from Jaffa in 1948, and he grew up in a refugee camp in Aqba Jabir in Jericho, Palestine, and in 1967 he was displaced again after the 6 Days War, and he ended up in Jordan by chance, actually, when they were fleeing the bombing and the atrocities. He ran along with his siblings and hopped on a bus, and that bus so happened to take them to Jordan. And this is where I grew up, in Jordan, and I've been here for about 12 years now. And this venue is very special to me. I feel right at home here. And when I say it's special to me, I say this because I know Palestinians aren't welcomed anywhere or aren't welcome everywhere. And it is a true honor for me to stand here with my comrades to share those few words. Look, I see now a lot of people are talking about things like the two-state solution and the recognition of Palestine as if it's something groundbreaking. I just want to tell people that the struggle in Palestine, this is not about a piece of land with a flag on it. This is about human dignity and about human rights. And when we say that what we want is liberation from the river to the sea, we say this because Palestinians are a byproduct of thousands of years of rich civilizational interactions that happen throughout millennia. And an essential part of our culture is our connection to land. And we've been ethnically cleansed, we've been slaughtered and massacred, and above all that, there's been a systemic erasure of our history and an appropriation of our culture. And our struggle did not start in 1948 during or after Al-Nakba, the mass displacement of Palestinians from the historic land of Palestine. It started with the ideology Zionism, which started as a left-wing ideology. And as a left-wing ideology, it didn't have any territorial preference. And then the decision was made to just go for Palestine because of all of the so-called chosen people for chosen land, and that was adopted later on by Britain in 1917 by the Balfour Declaration, when they announced this empty land, or a land without people for a people without land, which is an absolute nonsense. Palestinians have been living there and practicing our culture for thousands of years. But at the same time, Palestinians knew the existential threat that was posed to them by this declaration, the Balfour Declaration. And at the time, Palestinians were in possession of a national identity, in possession of political aspirations and a political consciousness. And we, of course, we started resisting, because we weren't just going to give away our land and our livelihoods and go live in the refugee camps. So we started resisting, and rightly so. And one of the major plans for the Zionist project was to change the demographic composition of in Palestine, so to make it, the majority of them, to make it Jewish people. Now, just to be clear, Palestinians are multi-faith, and we lived side by side, Muslims, Christians, Jewish people and atheists together for millennia. We never had any issue. In fact, I would stand in solidarity with the Jewish, with our Jewish siblings, in the same way that I stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. These are us. Jewish Palestinians are us. There's never in, like, my dad used to tell me how they're neighbors and how they used to play together. Never. And my grandfather, never. There was never anything like, now they make it about religion. This was never about religion. This is about a racist ideology that is based on ethnic cleansing, that is based on supremacy. And all we're asking for is dignity and human rights. So after this, just back to the Balfour Declaration and Palestinian resistance, by 1947, the Zionist project was only able to capture 5% of historic land of Palestine, which was in no way enough to create a Jewish state in Palestine. And that was also after the Second World War and the atrocities of the Holocaust. And then the Petition of Palestine received support from world countries, from Europe, from the USA, from Australia, because they wanted to have an answer to Europeans' created Jewish problem. This was never a problem for us Arabs. That was a problem in Europe. In fact, anti-Semitism is a European disease. That was never a part of our culture as Arabs. And after receiving this support, the UN wanted to go ahead with the partition of Palestine. Palestinians rejected. I mean, if anyone with any common sense would ask the question, why would we approve or accept something that would disadvantage us, that would lead to our own displacement from our own land? Of course we rejected. And of course the Zionists said, yes, we are going ahead, because we had nothing and now they have something where they can build their own Jewish supremacist so-called state. So we rejected that. Now, the media narrative around it is that Arabs went into a voluntary war with the Zionists. That was not voluntary. None of that was voluntary. We lived in our land for thousands of years, and rightly so, we resisted this project. That was supported by the British and Europeans, and even though the Arab countries tried, or the Arab armies tried to intervene as well, at the time, Arab countries were also getting out of their own colonization. They're fragmented and weak, and they didn't stand a chance. But now that we're talking about the two-state solution, fast forward to 2025, I just want to say about the two-state solution that this is not like drawing a line in that geographical area between Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. No, it is not. So this is another reality. It is not a solution. It's another reality where Palestinians are expected to give more concessions to our own occupier, to be allowed to have some form of conditional authority over 22% of the historic land of Palestine, with denied going to Jerusalem. The checkpoints would still be there, no right of return, and no right to access our own natural resources. This is the reality of the two-state solution. As Palestinians, we reject this reality and we demand equality in our own land, from the river to the sea. We're not calling for supremacy. We're not calling for special treatment. We are calling for equality. And those who were displaced and ethnically cleansed from our own land, we demand that we go back. We go back and practice our culture on our own land, the land of my parents and my grandparents. This is what we demand, equality. And if we're sitting here asking what we're going to do, I actually believe that any change, whether this is about Palestine or about anything else, any change is not going to be decreed from above. It is going to happen on the back of a huge grassroots movement. And I'm asking you all to join existing grassroots movements, because what we need to create is a big coalition where they can't ignore us. They can't ignore us in Parliament. Those sitting in their comfort, they shouldn't ignore us. And we will stay and we will challenge them where they do not expect us. I want to work with every grassroots movement on the ground, the climate movement, the disability movement, peace movement, anti-war movement, all movement, because what we have right now, it is an existential threat. And this might sound bleak, but I think it's too late for Palestinians in Gaza to be saved now. I think it is too late. Malnutrition is a permanent condition. It is something that affects every organ in their bodies. And now, even if food is allowed in, it is too late. This is the reality, that we denied those food trucks for a very, very long time. This didn't happen overnight. This didn't happen over a week or over a month. In December 2023, Human Rights Watch did say that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war, and that wasn't enough to get countries to intervene. At that stage, I was still saying that what's happening there is self-defense. There is a systemic starvation, forced starvation happening. And I think that it's too late for us to do anything for the Palestinians in Gaza. But what we need to do now, we need to stand together in solidarity with our humanity. There are still Palestinians in the West Bank who are going to face the same reality of Palestinians in Gaza. And I call upon all of you to never stay silent and keep holding those in power to account. And again, I am here to work with every single person on the ground, because this is about our future. Thank you.
Woo. Indeed, indeed. This is the importance of solidarity. Awareness comes before solidarity. And much of what we do in the work of the Pacific Peace Network and IPAN and WILF, ICAN, is about educating people in our community, young people, people in unions, people across the board, really. As Remah says, the importance, this needs a mass movement to turn this terrible ship of death around. I'd just like to point out from a Pacific point of view that the people of West Papua are experiencing something very similar to what the Palestinians are experiencing, the colonisation of their lands by the Indonesian government and the ruthless killing and denial of lands that's going on there is something that we need to keep uppermost in our minds too, in this part of the world that we live in. Okay, so I'm going to now welcome up Senator David Shoebridge, and a big thank you to David for making the trip to Brisbane to speak at this conference This is the second Pacific Peace Conference that we've held, and David was at the first 2 years ago as well. We're hoping that the next Pacific Peace Conference in 2 years' time will be in Fiji, as Mary will talk about later on. And I'm hoping that that to happen and that we'll all be there at a peace conference in Fiji in 2 years' time. So I don't think David really needs any introduction. He's so often on our in our thoughts and in our media. David's the Defence and Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Australian Greens, and we really appreciate all the work that he is doing to keep these issues uppermost in people's minds in Australia. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Annette. I'm not going to touch that, Trina. So
We're gonna have to move. We're gonna have to move this up, David, so you can be seen online.
The computer rather than the microphone, David, so that the
right.
people online can.
All right.
Terrific.
Very tall, David.
Everything's relative, Trina. Oh, look, thanks everybody for coming together today. And I want to thank Uncle for the welcome to country and welcome onto this beautiful Jagger and Turrbal land. And it is magical. I mean, look at the speakers by all means, but looking out at the river and this beautiful country we're on, and think about the obligation we have to work with First Nations peoples to re-establish ownership and to acknowledge sovereignty of this land. I also want to acknowledge and thank the organisers. This is, a huge collective effort to bring everyone together, to get the panels of speakers together and to keep peace on the agenda. And it's really critical we come together to talk about and plan for peace, because I can tell you around the rest of this country, there's a lot of people coming together to talk and plan about war. And this is a really important counter narrative. So thanks everyone. And finally, the nurses and midwives. The connection with unions and working people, and that connection between peace and our fundamental material conditions. And imagine if we could spend all of our time not organising against war, but organising for workplace rights and to protect the environment and connect with other people around the country. Thanks to the nurses and midwives for letting this happen at their premises today. I was having a look around for sort of, little bits of inspiration about thoughts about peace. And there's this quote from Albert Einstein, actually he gave on this exact day in 1931. And he said, war can't be humanized, it can only be abolished. It was a pretty bright cookie, Albert Einstein. And I think it's a great sort of sense for where we should be going, because as you look at what this country has been doing and the part that this country has been playing over the last, decade and a half in particular, you can see that our key decision makers and a huge amount of our national wealth has been directed towards war and actively and intentionally planning for war. And with that has come a whole series of deceitful narratives, a whole series of gaslighting of the Australian public in order to justify something that our public just fundamentally rejects. You ask the Australian public, should we be arming ourselves and preparing ourselves to engage as a bit player in the next US war, wherever that may be, and particularly with China? Overwhelmingly, the Australian public say, well, hang on, that would be crazy. Why on earth would our key decision makers be actively trying to enmesh ourselves in a war with the likes of Donald Trump against our own region and against our major trading partner? The Australian public rejects that fundamentally. So what they've been trying to do desperately, and it's not just the last decade and a half, but you can see it ramping up in the last decade and a half, is try and create this fear narrative, and use a fear narrative together with a bunch of kind of traditional tropes about us needing a great and powerful friend and leaning into shared values with the United States. Combine these two narratives to persuade the Australian public that we should be spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to prepare ourselves for war. But I will run through the first part of my contribution and talk about that noxious narrative, the damage it's doing, how it's enmeshing ourselves in the United States, plans for the next war. And that's all a bit depressing. I'm sorry that first part of the talk will be a bit depressing. But then I want to sort of take us to where I think the narrative is going and the hope and the combined movements. And it's part of what Remah and Alison have spoken about, the combined movements that I see as a way out of this, because I see a way out of this. And I absolutely see a way out of this. I'm sorry, Alison, I just seem to be following you around the country over the last few days. Alison and I spoke together at an anti-AUKUS event in Marrickville, in some bloke's electorate, Graindler. I can't recall whose electorate was. Hundreds of people came together to ask and demand the government, Parliament, to end AUKUS and get the hell out of AUKUS. And then I was grateful Alison was part of a broader briefing that came to Parliament to talk about what the Australian government and Parliament should be doing to do everything we can to end the appalling genocide in Palestine. And of course, Remah, we've been very grateful for the work you've done advocating the federal election campaign and the continued work you do on Palestine. Thank you both. So what is the state of play? Well, at the moment, we are enmeshed in this AUKUS arrangement. And you all know what AUKUS is, but I'll just give you a little summary. It's this arrangement between Australia, the United States and the UK. The first part of it is this nuclear submarines, the pillar one of AUKUS. And that's where, if you accept their narrative, we spend $375 billion, last time I checked, in order to sometime in the mid-1960s, in the mid-2060s, have half a dozen nuclear submarines, which might mean we have 2 in the water doing something useful at any one point in time. Now, this is not a hawk audience, right? You're not here to say, how should we spend our money to become the world's best warfighting machine? But bloody hell, $375 billion to put 2 boats in the water in the mid-1960s seems pretty bloody crazy to me. Yet, so if it's, that's called pillar one, right? Pillar one of AUKUS. And their plans are we get a couple of second-hand Virginia-class nuclear submarines from the United States in the mid-2030s. They'll be freshly painted and carpeted. And then we work together with the United Kingdom to build our sort of semi-Australian, US, UK nuclear submarines from the mid-2040s onwards. And that's pillar one. And pillar two of AUKUS, though, is in fact even more insidious in some ways. Pillar two of AUKUS is where we remove all of the trade and intellectual barriers for our industrial base and our research base, so that our industry, our universities, our industrial base is just open to the US military industrial complex. And weapons and information and knowledge can just seamlessly move on weapons and killing between Australia, the US and the UK. And that's already been implemented by the federal parliament to remove all the barriers for the washing of weapons and weapons parts and knowledge between Australia, the United States and the UK. I keep saying the UK, but really, you know, the gorilla in this is the United States. We're a little minnow and the UK is a minnow. It's really about the US taking over our industrial base, taking over our research base and using it for their own purposes for warfighting. It's real 51st state stuff. So that's the sort of broad structure of AUKUS. But of course, why does the United States, why are they focused on Australia? And what's their plan out of AUKUS? Pretty much every rational decision maker, every rational analyst says, we will not get nuclear submarines out of AUKUS, right? So for the United States to hand over those renovated, freshly painted, second-hand Virginia-class submarines in the mid-2030s, the US President and the Secretary of Navy have to sign off to the US Congress that the United States has plenty of nuclear submarines for itself and it's not in any way going to harm their capacity to deliver whatever the hell they want to deliver with nuclear submarines. And everybody agrees that in the mid-2030s, the US is going to have a critically, for their purposes, their warfighting purposes, a critically low number of nuclear submarines. And that's partly because they had a peace dividend in the mid to late 1990s and they stopped producing nuclear submarines then at the rates, and they're not going to have enough for their own purposes. And the most senior procurement officer for the US Navy was in front of the Congress just in the last week and was asked about, well, will there be any spare submarines for Australia in the mid-2030s? And he basically said no. He said, but in order to have spare submarines, they need to be churning out 2.5 a year new submarines, and they're currently churning out one and a bit. There's no prospects for that changing. It's going to require a revolution in their procurement, and he doesn't see that happening. And meanwhile, the Albanese government is in the process of handing 3 billion Australian to the United States, which is just a kind of down payment, a little tribute payment. I think they deliver it in sort of rubies and gold. $3 billion to the United States to try and lift their capacity to build nuclear submarines. And we're also gifting about $5 billion to the UK, to that struggling entity called Rolls-Royce, for the UK's nuclear reactor program, to be able to produce nuclear reactors for the AUKUS SSN submarine. So we're handing billions to the US for their industrial base to build nuclear submarines. And the industrial base that we're subsidising is not only going to produce Virginia-class submarines, which have sort of traditional conventional weapons on them and are used to hunt other submarines. The billions we're providing to the US will also go to help the US build these Columbia-class submarines. And the Columbia-class submarines are doomsday devices. They're the submarines that carry multiple, like dozens of intercontinental ballistic missiles, all with multiple warheads. They're designed to sort of end organised human life as we understand it. We're subsidising the production of those as well with the money we're sending to Donald Trump. But on no view, on pretty much no rational view, will the money that we pour into the United States or the money that we pour in the UK allow either of those things to happen. The UK's reactor program is in, pardon the pun, meltdown. It won't work. Their own audit agency says that. And the US will not be producing enough spare nuclear submarines to give any to us. Meanwhile, we keep the farce going, we keep the pretense going, and we keep the money going. We have this agency in Australia as part of the Defence Department called the Australian Submarine Agency. The Australian Submarine Agency's only purpose is to run the nuclear submarine project. And to give you a sense of the scale of money that we're spending on this crazy venture, last time I checked, there were 800 or so staff in the Australian Submarine Agency. They had a budget that's touching up to $500 million. Their budget grows and their numbers grow every year. They're in charge of this submarine project. 800 staff, $500 million. Guess how many submarines they have? Naught. And that is just going to keep eating into our public expenditure year on year on year. So if we're not going to get nuclear submarines out of the AUKUS project, what is in it for the sort of war makers in Australia and for the war makers in Washington? Well, while the pretense of us getting nuclear submarines is running, we're building in Australia a whole lot of infrastructure to service and to operate nuclear submarines here. And we're setting up a defence-run nuclear submarine, a nuclear energy so-called safety agency to handle waste and the waste stream that comes out of nuclear submarines. And we're in the middle of spending $1.7 billion of our money on building a nuclear submarine attack base just off Fremantle, off Perth, on a place called Garden Island, HMAS Sterling. That's already been budgeted for, the money's been spent, and the $1.7 billion will be spent by 2027, and we'll have built a nuclear submarine attack base on Garden Island up and running by 2027. And on nobody's timeline does Australia have nuclear submarines by 2027. The only purpose of that base is for US nuclear submarines to be positioned and based in Australia. The reason the US wants that is because it's a shorter trip to go up to the Malacca Straits to interdict trade and potentially Chinese nuclear submarines or other naval assets in the event of a war. So we're spending $1.7 billion building the US a nuclear attack submarine base off Fremantle. I don't hear the Albanese government asking for consent of that. We're giving $3 billion to the US in the short term to help them build doomsday devices like the Columbia submarine. We're giving $5 billion to Rolls-Royce to help the UK build their nuclear reactors. And what does Australia get from this? Well, it's worse than bugger all. what we get is the primary thing we get is we lose sovereignty and control over our military, over our industrial base, because literally the US is swamping it already with their defense primes. We hand them over all of our research and intellectual property. And we continue this pattern of a massive expansion of the US military's footprint on this country. Because the US doesn't see us as a partner, right? We're not here to be some kind of considered equal partner for the United States. The United States really wants like two things out of Australia, maybe three things. The first thing they want out of Australia, and it's their most important goal, is they want a series of bases and footprints in Australia, and they want to use us as a springboard for a war with China. And one of the reasons they're particularly keen to do that is because their existing bases in Okinawa and Guam are likely to be annihilated in the very first few days or hours of a war with China, if they ever go down that pathway, and therefore assets in Australia are slightly more survivable, and it's a better space to put it. And with that in mind, they've pre-positioned 2,500 US Marines in Darwin. They have expanded, it's meant to be an RAAF airbase, but it's an increasingly a USAF RAAF airbase in Tyndall, which is about 100 kilometres or so, a bit more south of Darwin. They've massively expanded that airbase in order to allow them to operate nuclear-capable B-52 bombers and B-1 and B-2 bombers from that. And they're positioned there now in rotation at RAAF Tyndall. They continue to invest in Pine Gap. And we know that Pine Gap has from leaks from within Pine Gap, was most likely used to help target the illegal strikes on Iran most recently, as well as being used by the Israeli military for targeting in Gaza. They have the Harold Holt submarine base in northwest Australia, which is used to the primary way of communicating with submerged US submarines around the world. If ever the message goes out to destroy organised life as we know it, it'll probably be sent out through Harold Holt in northwest Australia. And now they're building, and they're going to have built for them, this submarine base in WA. And they desperately want to build an East Coast nuclear submarine base. And they're looking at potentially Brisbane, but most likely Port Kembla in order to do that. What do we get out of this? Well, we surrender our sovereignty. And if you look at the way our Defence Force is being structured, our Defence Force has not been designed to defend Australia. None of this money is designed to defend Australia. All of this expenditure is for us to be a little subunit of US military deployments in the Pacific. Like 2 nuclear submarines do not make sense for Australia. They don't defend Australia. We don't need nuclear submarines to defend Australia. Their only purpose is to project force thousands of kilometres from our shore. But even then, they make no sense unless they're part of a broader US deployment, which we're part paying for in order to constrain China. So can I finish with hope? That is crazy, right? But people see it for what it is, increasingly see it for what it is. And they're making the linkages between our surrender to the United States under AUKUS, this billions of dollars going for heaven knows what purpose, this expansion of US military, with what's happening in Palestine. And they can see this unmasking of US power and this unmasking of global violence. And they can see that we're involved in these global supply chains. And they desperately want us to be a force for peace. And in many ways, Donald Trump is crazy and erratic. And we all see that. But what he's done is really just expose what has been US policy and US militarism for decades and decades and decades. And now we can all see it. And we're seeing it happen in real time. So when we get things like Penny Wong in the parliament just in this last week, when we're asking her and challenging her to stop sending weapons and weapons parts into the genocide in Gaza and to sanction Israel like we have Russia, and then Penny Wong steps up and says, no, we don't send weapons or weapons parts into Israel. We only send non-lethal weapons parts for an F-35 fighter jet. The mask is just being ripped off, right? And I can tell you now, the peace movement, the Free Palestine movement, the anti-war movement, the nuclear movement, the anti-AUKUS movement, it's building together with a powerful way that I don't think we could have imagined even 3 or 4 years ago. Let's do what Remah says. Let's harvest that movement. Let's build the mass movement, because I can tell you now, I've been down there in Parliament. It's a toxic place owned by the war parties. And we're not going to change it just in Parliament. I'll do what I can, but the only way we're really going to change it is mass movements like this. Thanks very much.
Oh, wow. Three wonderful speakers this morning. Thank you, David. Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Remah. It is on your program now that is morning tea time, but we have maybe just 5 to 10 minutes for questions from the audience here. And if I'd just like to let you know that we've got 34 people, 38 people online from 39 from all parts of Australia and internationally. So it's great to have them there. And we have got a question. I'm going to just pass it over to the speaker. Would someone like to help this lady to yeah,
The impact of nuclear weapons on marine life.
Thanks very much for that question. This is about the impact of militarism and military preparedness on the marine life. Talisman Sabre.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And indeed, you know, even when they're not firing nuclear weapons off, I mean, which would be cataclysmic for all life on Earth, Talisman Sabre, the military sonars, the military operations for Talisman Sabre has a really negative impact on marine life as well. So basically, you can just, wherever a military is operating, bad for the planet, I think is a nice short summary.
Thanks, David. Any other questions from people? Margie, yeah?
I've got my question, which is about the waste dump. Because they, like you said, they've put the infrastructure into the waste dump as we predicted right at the beginning. And I have heard that the country's dumping the waste. This is like in 40 years' time. The waste dump is like a 40-year project into the future, probably. Would you come to the microphone?
Better.
Because the people on Zoom can't hear you. So if you talk at the
just come around here so people can. You need to come around here.
It's funny setup.
And you can use that as well.
Sorry, I just got out of bed. My question is that I have heard that somebody will make a lot of money out of the waste coming in. That that they'll pay potentially that's a place the government will make money is by another 400 billion coming in 40 years' time. And obviously that's not money that would trickle down to us. That would presumably trickle down to the whatever the elite class is in 40 years' time.
Yeah. Well, there's not, when the government tried to ram through their new legislation to set up a military nuclear regulator, which is going to deal with all the waste from AUKUS submarines. Their initial drafting permitted all of the waste cycle from any US, UK or Australian submarines to be dumped anywhere in Australia. And that would include the hundreds and hundreds of kilograms of highly enriched weapons grade uranium that is in every single US and UK submarine. We called that out originally because we did the mistake of reading the legislation. And the government said, oh, terrible conspiracy theory by the Greens, not true, not true, not true, not true, until the Department of Defence and every single stakeholder said true, 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 true. And we eventually shamed them into amending this legislation to say that they couldn't use the waste from the reactor cores from US and UK nuclear submarines. We wouldn't take that waste, but we take all the other waste. But I think it was a very clear indication of what their plans are. And if they can't get it through in round one, they want to normalise nuclear waste coming into this country through the other parts of the operation of nuclear submarines. And then they definitely have a plan. And if you go to a defence, and I'd urge you not to for your own sort of mental well-being, but if you go to one of those big defence conferences where they're selling weapons and killings and platforms, and they're massive things, like they fill up football-sized fields of spruikers for weapons. You also find hanging around those spaces consultants and spruikers for US waste, deep waste, nuclear waste repositories. And they're out particularly hunting in WA and South Australia, and they super want to put their waste here. In fact, there's another facility in the NT that they're also targeting. And some former Australian politicians are looking to jump on the gravy train and become directors of those companies to have deep waste nuclear. Yep.
Thanks, David. We've got a question here. Thank you. I think probably we should stick to this last question before morning tea, and
There's one online, there's a chat.
and there's a question online as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's two questions, but I'll just advise you when we do finish those two questions, the morning tea will be through that small kitchen there. There's an urn as well as a hot boiling water, one of those fancy taps. So we just encourage people to move through quickly and come back to your seat, because we won't have a lot of time.
Hi, look, thanks. It'll be very, very short. Okay, well, I've got to stand here and show my ugly face at the camera. Okay, I'm an ex-journo, or I'm still a bit of a journo, right? I still write. One of the things that occurs to me is that the press in Australia is really quite controlled. So up here. So I'd really like to get your impressions of the Australian press, because I think on the whole, they really subdue the reality of what's going on. So I'd like your comments.
Just to clarify, the question is about the press and the complicity of the media. Is this the question? Yeah. So look, I've always said that with mainstream media, I mean, they're very complicit. It's actually more than complicity. It is enabling a genocide when you are taking words straight out of the Israeli occupation forces and put it on the headlines of our mainstream media. This is not just complicit. This is enabling, because mainstream media has incredible reach. And we actually need allies in mainstream media. I'm highly critical of mainstream media, but at the same time, we do need allies within our mainstream media because of the reach that mainstream media has, and because whether we like it or not, people are impacted by what we hear all the time from the news, from our politicians. I don't believe that people are inherently racist or whatever, but they respond to the climate that our mainstream media and our politicians create for them. So I believe that the media is enabling this genocide by refusing to report truthfully about what's happening in Palestine. This is not about objectivity. This is about the truth of people who are risking their lives, putting their lives on the line to document their own genocide, so that the media that is not allowed inside Palestine can see the truth for what it is. And if we are to engage the media or have allies from the media, is for us to actively reject the narratives that they put out on their TVs or social media. It is our responsibility to actually be pushing for truth in our media. And as much as I love independent media, and I think it's necessary and we need to have independent media, and I'm very proud of a lot of people who left mainstream media to start their own independent media channels, support them. And at the same time, we want to make sure that this becomes the standard for mainstream media, because we don't want to end up preaching to the converted. We actually want to reach as many people as we can. I hope this answers your question.
Thanks, Remah. We have a question from one of the people attending online, which I'm going to move to now. And it's a big one, really. Why do our current political leaders, the Prime Minister Albanese and our Foreign Minister Penny Wong, continue to support the United States in its responsibilities, you know, either whether they're in Australia or what they are supporting internationally? It's a big question.
Thank you. It is indeed a big question, and thank you to people online who asked it. It's the core question, and I hope that today in Melbourne, the Victorian Labor Party will make some decisions that influence policy. Why are our governments of both kinds and our current Defence and Foreign Minister and our Prime Minister so timid, so terrified of getting offside with the United States, even when they have just won a large endorsement from the Australian public to get on with the job? I'll tell you why the problem is. Because they go to an election without saying what foreign and defence policy is going to consist of. So when the people vote, they hope, their hopes about those things are not reflected in any promises that the incoming government has made. They don't say, we are going to go hell for leather behind AUKUS and we're going to back Trump whatever he does. They don't say that, but they do it. And then people are disappointed because they haven't been offered the choice. Now, here's the problem. Australian governments never ask the people if they want to go to war. This is why we have Australians for War Powers Reform, because we want the Parliament, at least, both houses, to vote if there is to be a war. And if the Parliament votes against it, as in many other countries this can happen, then they can't go. And it can't happen. And the reason they don't change this, and they haven't changed it, is they want the power. They want to keep it. Both sides of major parties want to keep it in their own hands. And it is becoming extremely dangerous because they are spoiling for a war against China. Whatever Trump may do or say is unpredictable. But what he appears to want is for China to be attacked aggressively by a coalition, including Australia and Japan. And what we need to get across through our elected representatives is, hell no, we won't go.
Briefly. Yeah, I agree with the broad thrust of that, Alison, but I would say it's even more venal than that in part. Like, there's a great article today in the Sydney Morning Herald. It's nice to see the Sydney Morning Herald not do red alert and that sort of fear-based anti-China articles for a change. But Deb Snow has done a great story today called Battle Stations, the former PM, ministers and military brass cashing in on Australia's defence spending bonanza. I'd urge you to read that, because you can see how people move from being defence minister one day to being on the board of Lockheed Martin the next day, or from signing off on a contract involving underwater submersibles one day and then waiting 13 months for the cooling off period and then getting a job with that same company. Or being, former opposition leader, defense minister, and then joining all of these US boards. So there's that part of it, which is just generally, I'd call it venal. It's about money and careerism. There's also careerism inside the Defence Force too. And I think we should not forget the role in which a bunch of largely men really get excited by going over to the United States and pressing buttons and seeing things go whoosh, and being near big machines that do industrial scale killing. Like, that kind of excitement about the war industry is also a part of it, and it's obscene but true. And finally, I'd say this, the US has been very effective at literally buying our democracy, right? And sometimes people ask me, well, if Green's policy was implemented and we actually started removing every single US base from the country and getting an independent foreign and defense policy, where would our biggest threat come from? I can tell you how now, sure as hell wouldn't come from China. Like, the biggest threat, if we actually made these decisions to move towards an independent and foreign defense policy, would be the United States. They would be pressing for a coup here quicker than you could say Central America. And I think we should be real about that. And there is a political fear that if you take an independent action against Washington, they'll use military, political, economic powers against whichever government decides to show social independence. And have a look at what happened with that tiny little bit of independence when we signed a contract to get French submarines. instead of being part of the traditional US-UK procurement strategy. You know, the efforts that were made to undermine even that tiny bit of independence. So I think it's those multiple things playing together.
Well, big thank you to our three panelists for the first session of this Pacific Peace Conference. Everything that we've talked about today we've talked a lot about Australia, but the impacts for these policies and this momentum, this march to war, very much affects people in the Pacific, including us as part of that Pacific ocean of peace that we'd love to have. The memories of the Second World War, the occupations, the above ground tests, and you'll hear more of that in the next session. But I just encourage you all now